welcome everyone to Staffbase's webinar, Foster Allyship, Inspire Inclusion, Celebrating Women's Contributions in Comms. I've got four amazing women from the world of comms here with me today, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves because they're all going to do a much better job of it than I will. So I'll start with you, Kim, and then you can pass the baton.
Hello, everybody. Nice to meet you and see you. And it's great to be here. My name is Kim Clark. My pronouns are she, her. And I run a DEI communications firm. And so I help communicators, especially internal communicators, bring the power and possibility of DEI with the power and possibility of communications. And let's figure out what that intersection can really bring into bringing our cultures, our workplaces into a new era where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. And I am also the co-author of The Conscious Communicator, The Fine Art of Not Saying Stupid Shit. Can we say that, Lauren? I don't know, but I just did. So
I think it's all right, especially the book.
Cynthia, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cynthia Baker, and I am here in sunny Capel, Texas. I am the Director of Communications for Brinks Incorporated, and I've been here for about 5 years. And I lead everything from town halls to newsletters to product communications, you name it. So I'm excited to speak with everyone today, share my experiences, challenges, and hope that you will get something out of the discussion. Thank you. I'm going to toss to Kate.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. My name's Kate Isiche, and I'm a global internal communications consultant, founder of Where to Look Communications. I'm dialing in from London, sunny London, North London, and my whole business is focused on neurodivergence and communicating internally through the lens of neurodivergence, particularly autistic and ADHD people. My children are both neurodivergent with autism and ADHD. And so for the last 3 years, I've become somewhat of an expert around neurodivergence and how we can enable and support neurodivergent people through accessible communications. Yes, I work with global organizations, typically multinational, multicultural, multilingual, in order to effect change, positive change. That's me. I'll hand over to, is there anyone left?
Maridy.
Me,
Meredith.
I'm the last
sorry,
one.
Meredith.
Yes, of course, no. So my name is Maridy Palmer, and so I am a communications and digital experience manager with one of Domino's largest franchises, Team Cowabunga. I also work for a client solutions architect as a senior communications consultant. So I wear many hats, but my primary focus is in internal communications, just really helping to build that culture, bring awareness, build that morale with different organizations, and just anything similar to Cynthia, from town halls to just internal newsletters and just kind of managing and different types of communications platforms for employees at large.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I'm your host today, Lauren Burgess. I'm a customer marketing manager at Staffbase, also based in very sunny London. And it is my responsibility at Staffbase to really celebrate the success stories of all of our customers and all kinds of people in the world of IC. So yeah, that's why I'm here today. Thank you so much. And with that, I would love to jump into our questions. So I'm going to start with you, Kim. In our planning call, we talked a lot about privileges and intersectionality, and you had some really interesting insights into this with your DEI background. Can you maybe share with our audience a bit about your insights and why it's crucial for us to examine our own self-awareness and how that works?
Well, 1,000%. We have to. That's a key part of the work. The personal work that we do is going to show up in our professional work. And when you look at the Bureau of Labor and Statistics in the US, PR industry is made up of 88%, 87.9, so I'm going to round up, 88% of people who look like me, and 8% African American, 6% Hispanic American, and if I round up, 3% Asian American. So if people who look like me are in these places of power, responsibility, and we're the ones that are creating the content, we're putting together the communication strategies, imagine the downstream effects to a very multicultural, diverse population. Hopefully that's not the case in all of our organizations, but that is an aspiration. So when you think that way, we have to be taking a look at our role and what we're putting out there. And there's a thing called majority coding that my mentor taught me. And that is through the eyes of very performative communications that we put out there, that there's this kind of a single-mindedness of what we're saying out there that is not representative and resonant with all of our employees. And so we are in this place of trying to understand where we need to be coachable and where we need to step back. And I can talk more about that as we go through the questions. But when you look at me, society says white, and I have lived a white life. And we have to talk more about this as people who are white in communications, especially in positions of power. We have to talk about this. We have to talk about what does that impact have on the work that we do, and where we need to be doing more of our personal work. So I have invisible marginalization. I mean, being a woman, that is enough, right? But being a white woman, that puts me into another plane. However, being gay, but it's not visible, that changes who I am in certain rooms. I have Native American ancestry, but it's invisible. So if anyone has watched Reservation Dogs, there's a character named White Steve. So I'm kind of like White Kim. And so I literally, in my ancestry, I literally have cowboys and Indians, and I'm trying to, part of this work is just this motivation to try to reconcile that and that history. And so one of the things that we have to do as communicators, if you look like me, is we have to be introspective. We have to be looking at the power that we have and looking at our intersectional identities and the identities that are visible and invisible. It's a totally different thing when your marginalized identity is very visible. It's been politicized. We're trying to manage that as internal communicators. But if we're in organizations where it's like, we don't talk about politics in the workplace, I would love to talk about that right here, right now. but especially in 2024. But we have to be more bold, and we have to understand our power and privilege. And we need to leverage it for the benefit of the whole of our organization. So we need to be more self-aware. And I know a lot of us who look like me are afraid of saying the wrong thing. And so we're backing off, and that is exactly the wrong direction. We have to lean into this work, and you need to get support. You need to be coachable first and foremost, please.
I think you're right.
For the love of God.
Ultimately, it is. Yeah, it's about using the platform that you have to give space to the voices that are actually going to really have an impact in this space. And I know, obviously, our other three guests here are women of color and obviously have very different experiences. And I would love to maybe hear from Kate first about how you help to support businesses who are looking to be more inclusive and diverse in that regard.
Yeah, it's a really difficult one, because obviously affecting change is a challenge if it's just you on your own. You need to bring the party with you. And so it's a case of influencing, stakeholder influence, stakeholder management, being mindful of people's sensitivities, as Kim has just outlined. It's not an easy topic to broach. People are quite defensive. And so I find that perhaps being taking a neutral stance, shall we say, is a bit more helpful than combative. I try not to be combative, but it's difficult because you see the environment you're in and the limitations, and also the should we say, resistance there's continued resistance, and even more so now with, you know, in 2024, DEI budgets are being cut back significantly. There's been a real pushback, much like what happened during lockdown with working from home, you know, remote working. Then companies are now pulling back and saying, no, you know, this is over now. Everyone has to come back into the office. And it's a very similar thing with DEI. We're done with that now. The Floyd moment is over. That's all past now. We're done with it. You know, we don't need to spend any more budget or hire any more DEI professionals. So in that kind of setting, in that context, it is very challenging. But for me, from the neurodivergence lens, I try my best to persuade them of the benefits. DEI, organizations that put money into DEI and resource into DEI are financially more successful. You know, they rank higher in terms of engagement. So there are many benefits to investing in DEI. If you present it from the financial standpoint, then it always makes a difference. So yeah, looking at it through the perspective of the organization and how it can affect the business is another way of tackling the beast, shall we say.
Absolutely. I can't remember the exact figure, but I know that people that are coming into the workforce today rank like a commitment to DEI as a really important factor for why they choose to work with an organization. And again, like you say, like kind of hitting them where it hurts with organizations, that actually this is going to affect your turnover, your profits, like all of that is really important. Maradi, when we met before as well, you spoke a little bit about the specific challenges that you'd struggled with in your career in relation to your identity as well. Could you maybe talk a little bit about that?
Yes, of course. So for me, for starters, I would like to say that it's really refreshing to know that there are individuals in the workplace, you know, like Kim, that might, you know, present themselves as a white woman that are just self-aware, right, of their privileges. I think that's really important when building a workplace, right? But for me, so I am Black and Latina, right? So I have that, you know, people can say, okay, well, the Latina part might be invisible. If you know anything about, you know, just Latin culture, we come in all shapes and sizes. Shape, sizes, you know, colors. I mean, it's just, you know, we're very, very diverse. But just for me, being a Black and Latina woman and being a young woman, I've really had to kind of find a balance between finding a voice, like having comfort in my voice, but then also not hiding behind all the titles. So I had an interesting conversation with a colleague of mine one time, and you know, I was just talking to her about all of these things, and she told me, she's like, Moretti, hey, you know, you have to be careful. You know, women of color tend to hide behind titles. So, you know, understanding that is a trend, that is a thing that's happening. And then as a woman of color, as a Latina woman, I don't have to hide behind all of these. I mean, it's great to have, you know, certifications and, you know, get additional education, but also it's what you say matters. You know, you have a voice. You are knowledgeable in the topic. For me, being a young communications professional, sometimes, you know, I might get the side eye, like, she's really young. Does she really know what she's talking about? And yeah, I might not know everything, but that's why I kind of take the approach of being a sponge and absorbing information, you know, from other professionals that have been in the field for years, but then also knowing and standing on the fact that, you know, I am younger and I bring a new perspective and a new approach, and that is okay. You know, businesses need that. You have to evolve. So that's kind of what I do, and just my struggles in the past, and just kind of what I do to persevere forward.
Yeah, I think that's really beautiful. It's so important to just like own your voice and know that you have intrinsic value and a perspective that is completely unique to you, and that actually that is important to an organization, whatever that perspective is, because it's unique, that makes it stronger. And that's really, really powerful. Thank you. Cynthia, as well, I would love to give you some space to talk about some of your challenges if you'd like to.
We don't have enough time on the call. to talk about all of the challenges that I've had as a Black woman, professional Black woman in this space. And I think that it's important for any women of color that may be listening or that may come across this webcast in other channels. You do have to govern yourself differently as a Black woman, and not be, I've found that I've had to kind of tone myself down a little bit, and not be so outspoken and opinionated, which I am to my core. If you ask me for my opinion, I'm going to give it to you. And I always have one about everything. But in these spaces that are, truly led by white men, it is interesting how I've changed my personality to fit into these rooms and into these spaces with these white men, so that you come across a certain way and they'll feel more comfortable in working with you. So that is a challenge that I deal with on the daily, just working in corporate America. And, I've said this before, I don't think that corporate America is a place for Black women. And I know that's a controversial opinion, but I feel like we've had to struggle so much just to get half of what white men are, handed to them on a platter. If I was a white male, I would probably be an EVP at this point, given my talent and experiences. And you see, men just climbing higher and higher and higher. And it's like, they know something I don't. They're playing a totally different game. They have totally different advantages. So it is a challenge. And that's one of the things, is like how I've had to change my personality, how I change myself, how I tone myself down, how I don't speak my opinions, because you want to make them feel comfortable and that they can trust you and that she's not too outspoken. So that's one of the challenges. But like I said, this call is not about, we could talk a long time about challenges of women of color in communications.
Yeah, I think obviously I can't speak to your experience specifically, but there is so much emphasis on needing to be palatable and saying things in just the right way, or you're not going to be heard. And there are so many stereotypes around it being a negative to be emotional, to be passionate as a woman, which are kind of celebrated in very different ways for men. I feel like even in my career, not so much at Staffbase because I've been wonderfully accepting, but there's been a lot of kind of tone policing, and I've had a lot of feedback about myself being too loud or too pushy for certain things when I've felt so certain I'm right, and I'm passionate about this and I want to be passionate and I'm not ashamed of showing that. So yeah, very reflective of that experience. Thank you so much. Okay, I want to move on a little bit to thinking about how we build inclusive workplace cultures. And I'm wondering if you could provide some specific examples or strategies from your experiences that have effectively promoted diversity and inclusion. Kim, I think you had some great points about focusing on relationships and employee resource groups. I'd like to hear about that.
Yeah, and before I share that piece, I just want to relate to Kate. And I have a kid who's autistic. I have a son and I have a daughter who is dyslexic. And this whole idea of when I think of them coming into the workplace, like what Cynthia was saying, yeah, this isn't the best place for some of us in the corporate environment. It's because it wasn't built for them.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to fit in. So that's why DEI, as it is in a performative way, is so frustrating, because we're trying to fix something that wasn't built to be equitable, to be inclusive. So what can we do with what we have, what we have control over, like our channels, perhaps bringing in interns or hiring, But let's say we're on a hiring freeze right now and I'm on an internal comms team that everybody looks like me, which is the case for many people. Our neighborhoods look like ourselves, our faith houses may look like ourselves. And so what do we do especially if we don't have a lot of control in diversifying our team, which is what we should be doing in every way possible. So, well, working with whoever is running the employee resource teams. Anytime, like when Pride comes out, I have a personal investment in how Pride is talked about, the narrative around DEI in general, but also how Pride is talked about. And oftentimes it's talked about from the rainbows and the parades, and we're going to change our logo to the rainbow and all that kind of stuff. That doesn't help me. If somebody puts a window cling on their door that says, celebrating Pride, let's eat pizza, pizza for everyone. And it's like, those aren't the rights that I'm actually going for, but thank you. But we also have to acknowledge that LGBTQ plus people have rights because of the Civil Rights Act in the US from the mid-60s. We wouldn't have the advantages and the progress if it wasn't because of the work of the people who put together the Civil Rights Act in the mid-60s, thinking of other people. And that's the role model. So as a white person, as a white woman, particularly in comms, we have to be thinking about other people, not just ourselves, and putting out performative communications, especially around cultural observances. Mm-hmm. So oftentimes we will put together content that is about a community that we're not actually a part of. So in the book, Janet Stovall and I, the co-author, we have this depth model in there, and that really helps when there's a social issue on how to position your organization. But, on the regular, looking at your comm strategy, there's this thing called 3 C's that I talk about in the book. And this is helpful with these cultural moments to make sure that you're not being performative. The first one is celebrate. Yes, we need the visibility. Yes, we need the acknowledgement. But you can't stop there, and if you do, you are censoring the organization and not the community. It's not okay. Step 2, it's the crisis. Why is there a Pride in the first place? It started off as a protest, as a riot, as a stand for rights, a right to be, safety, opportunity to thrive, healthcare, So understanding that there's a crisis situation, over 600 anti-LGBTQ plus bills going on in the United States. Many of them have come into laws and then, pulled out of the court, but people don't talk about that. So there's a lot of challenge and very real safety issues on the LGBTQ plus community. Canada has put out a travel advisory to the US for LGBTQ plus Canadian citizens. So the world is noticing that this isn't a safe place for LGBTQ plus people in certain states particularly. So we have to talk about the crisis of the community and raise that education and awareness, and then be consistent. So it turns out, we're recording this in March, I'm still gay, it's not June. So, so the consistency, and that goes back to intersectionality we were talking about, which is a term coined by the wonderful Kimberly Crenshaw. And so looking at what we can do to educate, raise awareness, talk about things that need to be talked about, but allow the content to be led by the community itself. What do you need? That's inclusion. So if the whole system that I see in a lot of corporations where internal comms is given a budget, choose 4, culture moments in the year, that's tier 1. And they go out, they might have some speakers. It kills me when they ask for women to come speak during Women's History Month and then not pay them. Don't do that. Don't do that. And so you might have that, but then they throw some budget at wristbands or T-shirts during Pride that say "Love is love." That's not solving the problem. We have to have a call to action. There has to be an ask. And we have to look at, when we're talking about Pride, I'll stay on that example, what does the LGBTQ plus community within your workforce need support in? They need to lead that conversation. And then allies is we have to target, and then allies, what is the role of allies? So it's the relationships, the infrastructure, have the people in the community, whether it's employee resource groups, lead the content. Do not talk about a community. It's the disability movement's mantra of nothing about us without us.
100%. Yeah. I am a queer person myself. And yeah, that really resonates with me. I hate the whole concept of rainbow washing and it not being this like thing that is very core to like the beliefs of organizations. Like you say, they should be living that all year round. Maradi, I know you also talked about employee resource groups a little bit and helping them kind of have IC lead the charge with that. Would you like to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, of course. So, so I, 1000% agree with Kim. It's not a one and done type of situation. And so I think a lot of times and just in my experience, I have had to really, help lead the charge with that, as an internal communications professional. And so I think one of the most important things you have to do is just kind of remember, like, you have to be consistent with these conversations, right? And understanding your role as an internal communications professional, that essentially, you are, somewhat of a liaison between the employees and your C-suite leaders, right? And for me, I have found that, sometimes, we have these core values and you have whatever, the C-suite wants to push down to everyone. And like Kim said, okay, let's do 4 things and call it quits, right? But what I have found is that this is something that has to be woven in your culture. And the best way to do that is to hear from the employees themselves. What do they want to see? What do they need? Right. And so I think there's a variety of tools available that you can utilize to get that information. Right. So of course, employee resource groups, that's one, provide resources for the employees, right? Provide knowledge about the topic, about the awareness. Why is this happening? Why is it important? Instead of letting it just be, a social media post and calling it a day, like really delve into the issue at hand. And then sometimes also in my experience, I have found that some C-suite leaders, they don't really they know, but not really. They don't really understand the importance of it. So I think that's where, we come into play, right? Where we are able to have that conversation like, hey, and usually when you have the facts to, follow it up, like you have a survey from, all of your, a good chunk of your employees, like, hey, we want to really kind of, talk more about this. We want resources available for this. We, this is what we need so that we can be successful as a total being, right, in the workplace. So I think just kind of having those conversations, establishing those employee resources groups, but then having it within the culture to be transparent about the needs of employees. And the same way you need information from the top down, you need to bring it back up so that they are aware of what their employees need and what they want to see.
Yeah, absolutely. There needs to be that two-way communication because otherwise it's just all based on assumptions. And then it comes back into that thing of like, I just kind of think I know what people need. And that's when we start getting it wrong. I'd actually really love to hear from Kate on this topic as well, because obviously being so involved in kind of looking at neurodivergency, there are obviously very real accommodations that need to take place for neurodivergent people in the workplace. So I'd be really keen to hear about some of your strategies for helping to promote that kind of inclusion.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one because I think the organization needs a particular cultural base in order to start having those conversations. I've sort of realized that there are some institutions where it's not possible to start doing anything because there isn't that cultural foundation that supports any kind of effective change, and therefore you're essentially banging your head against the brick wall. So I've learned to pick my battles, but where there is a willingness to listen and a willingness to take on board advice and guidance and act on it, then yeah, there are things that you can do. ERGs are great. I agree with Maridi and Kim. I do have a bit of a love-hate relationship with them, because in my experience, they can be a tick box exercise. So people will say, oh yeah, we've got an ERG for that. You know, whatever group you're referring to, yes, we've got an ERG. They're doing everything we need to do, and actually no one knows what's going on. The ERGs get very resentful because they're tasked with doing everything and getting no reward or recognition for that work. But used effectively, done effectively rather, and resourced effectively, and given some budget, yes, they can be a good source of change. But yeah, from neurodivergence perspective, it's a case of acceptance, awareness, and acceptance, and involvement. So, looking at being willing to understand neurodivergence from the perspective of individual groups. So when we say neurodivergence, it's a term that's quite misused. People mix it up with neurodiversity, and neurodiversity is very different. So what we've got on this call here, and this webinar, is neurodiversity. So even though none of us are, well, I don't know, but I'm assuming that none of us are neurodivergent, we still have neurodiversity, because Kim thinks differently to Maridi, thinks differently to Cynthia. We all have different backgrounds, cultures, etc. So that's neurodiversity, but neurodivergence are specific conditions like dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, ADHD, etc. And what I found is there's such a dearth of knowledge around neurodivergence, particularly autism, that affecting change is very difficult. So when you try to explain what neurodivergence is, you tend to get this kind of response that, oh yeah, we're all a bit autistic, aren't we? And no, not really. Oh, I've heard about autistic people. They're really good at maths, aren't they? Yeah, not really. So yeah, it's the lens through which people see it. And I understand why they do it, because it's a difficult thing to broach, and so therefore people want to categorize it, put it into neat little boxes that are is much easier to deal with. But in fact, autism is a very complex condition, which affects people very differently, and depends on their background and their personality and their gender and their age and all of those things. But I think having a willingness to work through your people managers is key, particularly with autism and ADHD. There are such different nuances from person to person. Like Kim said earlier, I can't remember what the saying was, but there's a saying in neurodivergence that you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person.
Yes.
There are commonalities for sure, but there are also a wide range of differences. So I think, from my perspective, I always start with people managers. That's the most sensible starting point, because only at that level can you get a good understanding of the employees that you're working with, their particular preferences, because they will have preferences, and what works for them, and also what works for the team in reverse. So understanding where they're coming from, whether it be allowing them to spend part of their day in a particular area in an office or a pod or a meeting room because they find it more comfortable, there's less noise, then that should be an accommodation, to understanding that commuting is very difficult for them at peak time, and they may not be able to withstand the stress of traveling when everyone else is, and so allowing them to come in 2 hours later and perhaps leave a bit earlier even. It's that kind of understanding and ability to be flexible that will make the world of difference to an autistic employee, and understanding that it's not necessarily just a preference, it's also crucial for them to be able to feel comfortable. Pain, I've learned this over the last 3 years, pain is a huge part of their experience. They feel physical pain.
Yes.
When certain things that might bother us, that air conditioning really annoys me, it causes them physical pain. Yeah. And so, making those accommodations is more than just a nice to have. It's pivotal.
100%. Yeah, it's one of those things. There's just so much misinformation out there, and people have these very singular cultural touch points that they seem to get all of their information around, which, as you say, leads to this belief that it's this one particular person. And like, I have a lot of autistic people in my life, and one of the most infuriating phrases that they hear and that I hear in these communities is they're like, "You don't look autistic," whatever that means. And
Yeah.
it's just, yeah, there's so much diversity in neurodivergent kind of experiences as well. Thank you so much. Cynthia, I saw you nodding so emphatically during that little bit about the employee resource groups and like how they're rewarded. I would really love to just give you some space if there's anything that you wanted to add on that topic.
Sure. Well, I am actually the leader of the Black Employee Resource Group at Brinks. And one or several of the struggles that we have are related to time and recruiting people to help us and to get the events going. It's also employee time. We're asking employees to come to our events or be a part of this program. So it's another piece of my role. It's another piece that we're adding to the company, but it's also a struggle because we're fighting with time and we're fighting for a few minutes in their day. We're fighting for another 30-minute meeting. And I think the intention is good. I think that people want to participate. But at the end of the day, they're going to focus on the things that they need to deliver for their role. So I think that our employee resource groups at Brinks, and I support communications and I help all of the groups with their communications, but we struggle because employee resource groups are hard. It's an extra part of your role and it's an extra link in the day. And we're constantly, at that battle. Now you have a few people who are motivated, committed, are there all the time, and they're available to help you. But then it becomes a little resentful because it's always the same people every time doing all the work. So that's a struggle that we face in ERGs. I think they're necessary. I think there's a lot of good built into ERGs. I think there's a lot of goodwill that you can get from ERGs as a part of your company recruiting strategy. Employees love to see and they want to understand how your groups are set up and how you focus on D&I. But there are so many challenges in my level of what I've seen. I don't know if you ladies have seen that with ERGs, but the challenge is fighting for that time and getting support. So it's not always the same people doing all the work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other thing about like ERGs as well is there's sometimes a bit of lack of recognition about the emotional labor that goes into creating these things. Like the people for whom these are their lived experiences, they're having to mine those experiences and their feelings to actually bring that up and educate people that need it but ultimately it's not necessarily should be their responsibility, but they're the amazing volunteers that are giving up their time and that labor to do it, and they really are like I think a lot of the time kind of unsung heroes, all of those contributors in it. So yeah, thank you so much for putting the spotlight on that. So moving on a little bit, obviously each of you has achieved some amazing success in your respective fields. And I'd love to hear a little bit about some of the specific strategies or insights that you feel have contributed to your success as a woman in the workplace. And Marity, I'd love to start with you if that's all right.
Yes. So for me, we live in a globalized world, y'all. And, it's not going to change. It's going to continue to evolve. But for me, it's just understanding that, all of our experiences really matter. What makes us unique is what we can bring to the table. And so I have learned to really just kind of listen and, find the right moments to speak, to share my uniqueness, right? But I think that's, in a nutshell, I think that's what helped me, kind of become the communications professional that I am today, is just, accepting that we are all different, accepting that we all have a voice, knowing that we all have something to contribute, and, just kind of keeping that at the forefront and being more comfortable with having those difficult conversations and providing that insight on my perspective. So I would say that that's kind of what has helped me in my experience to become a little bit more successful.
Amazing. Kate, I'd love to hear from you on this topic as well.
Yeah, so very similarly to actually Meredy, I thought to myself, yeah, that's true. Because in my experience, I think one of the things that I feel I'm very blessed with, my parents blessed me with, is this global mindset. You know, I've never been afraid of other people's culture or way of being. You know, I'm comfortable in myself enough to be able to be comfortable in others' presence. So whoever it is, wherever they come from, I can be their friends. And I think you really need that quality as an internal communicator. I've worked in internal communications for over 15 years. And that's the one thing I think that has supported my career growth and development, is that ability to be able to talk to the person cleaning, you know, the floor, as well as the CEO, you know, in the same breath. I can talk to you. I can be your friend. I can be your insider, you know, the person who feeds back to you the organizational strategy and all of those things. So I think that's probably the most unique aspect of my personality that has helped me to forge a successful career in comms. Yeah.
I love that. And I think a really important reminder that as important as it is to recognize our differences, it is also incredibly important to recognize that we are all just people at the end of the day. And connecting on that human level is ultimately what communication is about, kind of at its heart. And I think it's so much the goal of internal communicators to create that sense of community. Like it's, you know, it's all the same root of the word. So thank you. I think that's such a lovely contribution. Kim, I'd love to hear from you on this as well.
Some of the best advice I got when I was in corporate, when I was in-house running in global internal communication teams, was commit, but don't attach. And it was almost too late before I heard that advice, because I'm passionate about the work, about making a difference. And people would call me intimidating, you know, and at first I was like, oh, then I better chill out. And I'm like, no, I have, going back to privilege, when we were talking about that, I have deep voice privilege. I have height privilege. I'm 5'10", you know, and so when I would walk into a room, I would walk in with confidence. I'd be ready to work, and I'm passionate about the work that I do, but people would read that as me being intimidating. And so I wouldn't necessarily always get promoted when I felt like I should have been promoted. And so I would leave and promote myself by going to the next job at the next level. So I promote myself. So reading the room and being confident about who you are. And but also that piece of advice has really kept me from burning out, even in doing this work when I've struck out on my own and started my own company. This is the third company I've started, but the whole commit but don't attach, when we're working with our leaders and putting together things that we know are the right steps, because as internal communicators, we have this superpower of looking and gaming things out. Like, we can see the trajectory that we're on. If we continue to make these kinds of decisions, this is where we're going to end up. And we're constantly trying to trim tab and course correct our leaders and HR, you know, constantly trying to course correct them. But there comes a point where it's just like standing in our own integrity. And once I could find that and say, okay, I could do more good not working within one corporation. I can have more of an impact, and freeing myself, giving myself that freedom to work with a variety of companies and industries and regions and stuff like that. And I'd say the other piece is just listening and staying curious rather than defensive and shutting things down and not wanting to have conversations that actually really need to be had. So making that space, but just listening, being curious, staying curious, that has also really helped me get really far in this work.
I love that phrase, commit but don't attach. I was at an event actually, I think it was last year, where I ran a roundtable which was specifically about how people in IC can help kind of promote good mental health for themselves. Because what we were seeing is that obviously a lot of, through the pandemic and all sorts of like global crises are going on, they're on the front line of that. And them like being so involved in their work and so passionate and so committed, as you say, they were taking home a lot of like that stress and difficulty and the things that they were having to communicate, and also hearing back from employees as well. Like that two-way communication also meant that a lot of people were coming to them with their problems. So I think finding ways to detach yourself from what you're doing in like a healthy way and protect your own mental health is so important. So yeah, I love that phrase. Thank you so much. Cynthia as well. Yeah, anything that you could talk about specifically contributing to your success as a woman in the workplace?
Sure. I just wanted to add that I think that women should continue to learn, continue to grow, and be willing to take risk. A lot of times, there will be some fear, there will be, some hesitation. But I think that as women, we have to surround ourselves with good people who will listen to us, who will support us, and help us as we begin to step out and make those big career decisions and those big career changes, and continue to grow and evolve in your role. You guys, I started out as a journalist. My degrees are in journalism.
Me too.
And yeah, I was going to be a reporter, a newspaper journalist. And before I left grad school, I had already switched to public relations. So when you look at the state of newspapers today and where newspapers are, it has completely changed. And it's a much smaller business model. And they don't have as many reporters on staff anymore. So I'm glad that I did make that change. And I've been able to build and create a career for myself in communications, still using my skill set, still using all my abilities. And as I grow, I think we all need to look at what is AI bringing to the table, and how is AI going to change how we work, and how do we make it work for us and don't feel like it's going to replace us, but make it a part of what you do and make it effective and help yourself use it and save time. So that's where I get to the part about growing, learning, technology. There's always going to be change. There's always going to be something that you need to pick up on. So that's my advice to anyone listening and to younger communications professionals. Don't be afraid of change. Don't be afraid to change it midstream.
Yeah. Yeah, embracing change and challenging yourself, I think, is so, so important. I think as women, we're kind of used to self-censoring more, and we're used to maybe not taking the same risks because there's this idea that like, oh, we're probably not going to be successful anyway in some respects. Like I think we've all heard the statistics around like women will only apply to roles where they have like 100% of the requirements on there, whereas men are far more likely to just give it a go with about 60% of what's on there. But as you say, being bold and taking those risks are what's going to really pay off. And I think, yeah, there are so many women leading the charge on that now. And I think one of the amazing things about women, and I can see from all of you here, is that it kind of takes somebody to walk through the door, and women will always hold it open for the people after them as well. And I think that really leads on really nicely to my next topic about the idea of mentorship. And I know, Cynthia, you've done quite a lot of mentoring in your career, and I'd love to hear a little bit about that as well before we move around the group.
Sure. The mentorship part of my role is probably the most rewarding. I really enjoy working with young professionals and kind of showing them the way, finding out, where they need the work, what they can grow on, what their strengths are. And I really enjoy that. I have about 3 mentees that I'm working with right now that I'm mentoring. And a lot of times they just have questions about, how do I present myself in this meeting? How do I show that I can take on this extra work? How do I move forward? Should I step out and apply for this? So a lot of times as a mentor, you're fielding questions. And I know in my career, when I started out, I didn't have a lot of people that I trusted. I didn't have people that I could talk to with those questions that I thought, these are really dumb questions. Why don't I know this? So I think that, if you can step out and be a mentor to young people, it will be such a rewarding experience for you. And you're also helping young professionals, because there isn't a lot of people out there willing to give a little bit of time to these young people and to help them along the way. So I've enjoyed it. I'm open to, helping young professionals move forward and just answering those questions. A lot of times they just have those questions and they're looking for someone to give them a straight answer.
100%. Maridi, I know that mentorship has played an important role for you as well.
Yes, definitely. So for me, I'm on the other side of the spectrum when it comes to mentorship. So I don't think that I've quite hit the experience level to become a mentor, to be a mentor for someone just yet. Maybe for someone starting out in the field, but I consider myself just kind of in the phase of being a mentee, right? Being that person that is willing to listen and absorb all the information and wisdom available to me. So I I enjoy I know I told Cynthia, I was like, I'm gonna reach out to you. You're gonna be one of my new mentors. Because for me it is so important to get in contact with other women, that look like me, that maybe have similar experiences to me, and it has helped me a lot, because I have had so many questions, like Cynthia says, it's typically, there's just a splur of questions that mentees have, and just being like a Black woman and a Latina woman in this space, there's a lot of stigmas and there's a lot of perceptions, of how I should react or what I should do or shouldn't do, and it can be from a conversation with a leader, with a leadership team member, or to pay, where I'm like, I don't know, should I ask for more pay? And then they're like, yeah, you need to ask for more pay. And it's like, ooh, but I don't know if I feel comfortable doing that. And it's like, you need to do it. And so for me, it has given me a lot of confidence and encouragement to just kind of continue forward in the field and learning how to navigate, the communications field, the corporate world that is not built for people like me, per se. So yeah, I'm all for mentorship. I am 1,000% on board for it. Hopefully one day, I hope to be able to be that person that can give back and help others. But for now, I am totally happy, being the person that is, reaching out to others and receiving that information. And don't be afraid to reach out to someone. I am, I'm probably known on my LinkedIn. I have, so many different connections and followers, because I just put myself out there. I'm like, yeah, I don't know, so I'm going to ask you. And it's okay not to know. Yeah, I mean, 1,000%. If you can find a mentor, find a mentor, because there's, in the midst of just a lot of people not willing to help or, share their secrets, there is always a gem there. There's always just, a saving grace, an angel somewhere that is willing to help you out.
Thank you so much. Just a note to the audience, by the way, that Kate unfortunately had to drop for another important engagement, but a big thank you to all of her contributions. Thank you, Maridi. One of my favorite pieces of sort of advice that my mother ever gave me was closed mouths don't get fed, to which she meant you have to ask for everything you want in this world. And it's something that I think of literally every time I'm hesitating. I'm like, this is something I need, something that I want. How am I going to get it? You have to go after it yourself. Yeah. I wonder if there's anything you want to add on this, Kim. I'm not sure if you've been involved in any mentorship programs.
I have. I'd actually like to talk about me being on the receiving end of mentorship, because it changed my career trajectory big time. So in 2004, I met Reverend Deborah L. Johnson, who identifies as a Black queer woman and a reverend. So when you combine those identities, it was with her professional experience as being a social activist, being a DEI trainer. She says, I've been doing DEI when I used to pay you to come to my trainings. Having her as my mentor since 2004 has completely changed because I immediately started taking, when I was learning from her, placing that DEI lens on communication strategies 20 years ago. And so ever since then, it's just, it led me to that point in 2018 to go out on my own saying, I need to go do this. And I went straight to her and I said, can I do this? Should I be the one that's doing this work? And she's like, you're going to be in rooms that I can't get into. You're going to be talking to people and get to people that I can't get to. And inclusion is inclusion. Yeah. So, if that feels like the calling for you, then you absolutely have to do it. And yes, sticking myself out there comes with its consequences, but the benefits always outweigh it. It's because I can't not do anything else. And it's because of that mentorship. And her having patience with my oblivion, where I needed education, where I needed the blinders taken off, and her patience with me, that has completely changed my career and therefore has benefited anybody that, reads the book or is heading in the direction of DEI communications.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you touched on something really important there, that obviously there is risk in being visible. Like there is risk in standing up for who you are and being visible in the world. And like, we would be remiss not to acknowledge the fact that does exist. Like, it does still exist in the world, and it's awful. But it's wonderful, like voices like yours that are just bit by bit, we are making the world better. And I have to believe that. I really do believe that. Thank you so much. I just want to end with the last few minutes with one final quick question. So if you can imagine that you are a mentor to yourself at the beginning of your career, what's one piece of advice that you would give you? And I'd love to start with Cynthia.
I would tell myself that I am enough and I'm talented and you can do it. Too many times I've been afraid and scared. And if I could see that young person and tell her again, you can do it. Don't be afraid. You're enough.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. Meredith?
So I would tell myself to continue, well, not continue because it's my younger self. So be bold. You have a voice. It's important. And also be willing to ask more questions and not be afraid of asking those questions. Don't be afraid of learning. You don't sound stupid because you're trying to figure it out. You're just trying to you're human. You're trying to figure it out. We all are. So I would tell myself that, just be bold.
Amazing. And Kim?
Live life by design. No company is loyal to me, no matter how hard I work and the late nights and the weekends and stuff. I'm disposable, so it's like, what life and legacy do I want to create? What kind of change do I want to make? What is within my integrity that is within my strength, within, talents, and what can I do to... My grandfather gave me this advice when I was a teenager. It was well-timed. He's like, leave a room better than you found it. And, many of us have heard that kind of advice, but leave a room better than you found it and live life by design. So look at your career and look at the choices. You have to own it. You have to promote yourself sometimes. And just be true to yourself.
Beautiful. I love that so much. Thank you. You are enough. Be bold and be true to yourself. Amazing advice. Well, thank you so much. This was such an incredible conversation. I'm so grateful.